Hello and welcome to the second edition of our Tech Recruiting Academy series, How to Recruit ... And I'm really excited to have the amazing co-host Hang Lee with us today, and also the wonderful Ishel and Ivan. Thanks for being with us. Today we are talking about how to recruit DevOps engineers. So I think it will be a kind of a cool session today. And before we start, I would ask the audience, thanks for joining as well, of course, and please use the LinkedIn comment section to place your question and make the session as interactive as possible, because we try to answer all the questions, we try to react on your comments. So really happy to see a lot of things going on there. And before we really start, or I start with my first question, I would really ask Ishel and Ivan to probably shortly introduce yourself.
Thank
Ishel,
you.
maybe start with you. Yeah, thanks.
Well, hi. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm really excited. And I'm Ishel Reese. I'm from Mexico, but live in Switzerland. If I have to say what I do, I'm a software developer that has a lot of experience in consultancy, mainly Java. That's my tool of trade, mainly. I also been doing DevOps for a very long time. I'm a public speaker and sit for several conferences. So I wear a lot of hats. I do a lot of community. I am involved in conferences, in selecting the program, organizing them, or speaking at them. And I also do a lot of open source. I am a promoter of open source in different categories, as ambassador, as part of Hacker Garden, or organizing kind of hackathons. It's not exactly that, but it's the best idea that you can have with you. So that, in a nutshell, is what I do.
Thank you, Ishel. Ivan.
So hi everyone. I worked as a programmer for quite some time, and then started my tech recruitment company that we are running now for about 8 years. And we built tools around recruiting. We built our own ATS. We built definitely in the last couple of months a couple of AI tools that we use internally, and also beta test with other recruitment agencies at that very moment. So basically my career is split in two parts. One part is the developer life, where we actually didn't have a dedicated DevOps person, but we come maybe to that later. So I was just a backend and a little bit full stack engineer. And now the recruitment topic is with me for 8 years, and I know also Hang Lee for 8 years. So I kickstarted my recruitment career with him. Basically, I was like, wow, if the recruitment community has such great people, then it must be the right career path. And I think this is probably the most important topic.
I want to interject here and just apologize to everyone for redirecting Ivan's career into recruiting. So if you've been on the wrong side of this chat, I'm really sorry. No, it's wonderful to have you on the show, guys, and wonderful particularly that you both have this type of experience where it's very diverse. The purpose of this series is to try and understand the different communities that have interactions. Engineering and tech recruiting, they have strong interactions. They have real reasons to want to work together. But oftentimes the behaviors of each side can be confusing to the other. We don't quite understand why engineers behave this way when from a recruiter side it should be obvious they do XYZ. Why are they doing ABC instead? And on the engineer side, oftentimes it's like, oh, why is this recruiter doing this? Like, didn't I say I wanted it this way? And then suddenly the recruiter is behaving in this way. So why are these behaviors like this? Let's try and explain them. Too often we just devolve into just like kind of ad hominem type understandings of the other side, where we say, oh, it is because these people are bad people. And yes, there are a few odd sorts here and there, but in reality, most of the time behaviors are driven by incentives. And let's understand what those incentives are, because I think if we understood this better, we'll be able to each side kind of better able manage that relationship. Because let's face it, if you're a recruiter and you have great relationships with the tech community that you're recruiting for and from, wouldn't that be a great thing? And if you're an engineer and you were interacting with tech recruiters, you had great relationship with tech recruiters, wouldn't that be a great thing for you? So that's what we want to try and get towards, and particularly today with DevOps. Like, is DevOps a particular type of engineer, or what is it in the psychology of the work that maybe attracts a certain type of personality or whatnot? Can we discuss that? So I wonder whether that may be the first question, really. Like, is there anything particular about DevOps?
No, I think the first question is really coming a friend of mine. So it's Mark, and he asked me to ask you, and he's very curious about your opinion on your definition of DevOps, as it is something special or probably extremely broad or extremely special. So probably I would be interested in get your definition of DevOps.
You want my definition, or
No.
the people actually know what they're talking about?
Yeah, probably in that order. So
okay, fine. I'm pretty comfortable with my definition of DevOps, but I'm open to challenge. But I think you can nest DevOps in the history of basically cloud software, essentially. So before the cloud, there wasn't really anybody doing DevOps. On-premise type servers, it was like a systems administrator, it was a database administrator, network administrator. Remember those folks? I do, because I used to recruit those people. But all of them disappeared when the cloud happened, essentially. So the cloud basically moved all the servers into a particular service area, and suddenly software engineers had to basically interact and configure cloud services. And that basically became kind of a component of the engineer's job. Bigger companies with bigger demands ultimately hived that off into a specialist function, which became DevOps. And typically, a DevOps person would be someone who was a programmer, but actually is more interested in configuration, deployment, release management, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my definition of DevOps. Tell me I'm wrong, folks.
Thanks, Hagen. I'm interested in Michelle's opinion on that.
I think you nail it. I only want to add an extra layer on that. You went directly into why we need it so much, why they jumped into the forefront. And that was because we now need to configure more things at scale. So now it became a full-time job. But the other part, and I think you didn't mention, is that all the agile DevOps revolution, which actually pushed a little bit more of this same activities to developers. Because, of course, when you are configuring a network, well, there is a known set of type of devices and set of type of configurations. But suddenly, it was about that people knowing also about software, how the software was built. And that comes in so many flavors, so many styles, so many programming languages. So it is possible. So now a lot of the engineers, of software developer engineers, have to know more about DevOps. So it is a subset of skills that were added on top of, sometimes on top of software engineers.
Thanks. Ivan, your thoughts on it?
As the question of Mark is really like really broad, right? You can probably, there's like even books probably written to reply to to that. So there's like different types of companies. So there's companies who stayed basically out of the cloud for different reasons, be it regulatory, be it because they just have a business model that doesn't require it. Then there is the other extreme, then the companies that use Kubernetes, giant management, DevOps management tools that sometimes actually are not needed for these companies. So a good DevOps pro friend of mine, he says, yeah, if you don't run something like, Dropbox, you don't need like Kubernetes and this giant chunk, for example, right? This is like one opinion that even a professional has. So even in the very, very super duper DevOps pros, you have on certain topics like different opinions. So to recruit in DevOps actually most interesting in a way, because as a recruiter, you can always say, hey, I'm a recruiter, I don't know the topic so well, tell me your opinion. and this will be like valid, right? It's not like, math, like 1 and 1 is 2, and there's like no, like 3 is the wrong answer, right? And here, if you talk about DevOps, there's actually no wrong answer, so it's a little bit like an advantage if you talk about recruitment, right? So there's this 2 types of extreme companies, I would say, the ones that didn't zero cloud and others that did cloud but actually shouldn't have done it. And there is everyone in between, yeah. And then you have the job profiles accordingly. So for each type of company, you have then for the first type where it's like they state where they are, they were like, we have the system admin. Okay, yeah, now your job title is DevOps, it's fine. Like, it sounds better. And the other type where it's really like, okay, we think we are like a super soon at scale startup, we need really this, but you have 10,000 documents. Why do you need this at scale thing? So actually, and the last type of company is actually rolling back now. You see the founder of Ruby on Rails, Hansemann something, he's like, okay, we had everything in the cloud and it was great, but the bill was too much from AWS. We roll everything back and put everything on premise. It's much cheaper and it works great. Bye, cloud providers. So yeah, you have a lot of development, right? So you need to follow all of that. And already that helps you to be, if you know this last bit that I just said as a recruiter, those who know, like, wow, this person is on top of the game and they're just a recruiter. So, yeah.
So the thing I'm getting from this, the answers, which is very, very interesting, and also actually from Mark's comment and question, it's basically a little bit more up for debate as to what DevOps is and where the hard lines are and so on and so forth. So maybe dissimilarly to let's say a language domain, we can say, look, clearly this is a Java person or person who works purely with Java technology. Same with Python, let's say. But with DevOps, it's not a technology, so recruiters obviously should know this. But it's maybe a philosophy. I think I like that kind of idea from Mark there. But it's also a descriptor for this action of needing to host something and deploy something, and to organize the application, organize the software, and all of that process, whether it's on cloud or on premise, that you may still have some DevOps actions that would oscillate between. So in the example, I think it was Basecamp that did the same. If they've rolled back from cloud to on premise, that doesn't mean the DevOps skills disappear or the DevOps people disappear. It's simply that DevOps engineers are in charge of that move. The systems administrator, network administrator titling, that's now been folded into DevOps as the thing that we call it now, I guess. So anyway, that's educational for me. So yeah, that's useful.
I mean, from my point of view, if I listen to that, and I'm normally for me, developers, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean in a positive way, they have kind of the skill sets and they have some interfaces within organization they have to collaborate and work with. But DevOps sounds for me having a lot of more interfaces and probably some other skill sets that are needed. So I'm thinking about especially soft skills if it comes to collaboration, if it comes to communication, if it comes to problem solving skills, and if it comes to adaptability. Is that true, or am I wrong?
I can take that.
Yeah, go ahead, Ishka. Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you, because right now, one of the ideas of DevOps person is that in large organizations, they are the interface that provides a lot of services to multiple teams. So in a way, they're going to be or a very important part of the entire development and maintain or running of the services. But and they do have a stake in every single project to be as successful as possible by reducing how much problems they have to solve individually. So yes, at the end of the day, if the service is down, if the service is not scaling correctly, if there is not a recovery process in place, it is going to be on the people in that team. It's not on them, but in a team that they are very, very integral part of it. And at the same time, they had to interface with a lot of teams that have other or their own internal goals to it. So yes, interacting with them, it's super important. They usually are not part of your team, like 7 days or 5 days a week or something like that. But it's still it is a team member of your development team or your
Yeah, I would say, Rudy, you have a good intuition, and that's going in the direction. If I'm thinking about jobs I had in the past as an engineer many years ago, it was actually quite bad sometimes. So that like if somebody has really the strengths of like, and usually it's like one, person taking care about the infrastructure and like 10 engineers, and they are basically dependent completely. Yeah, so it's not like two-way. Actually, it is kind of two ways, but in the organizations where I worked, it was not like that. So the engineers was really dependent on the infrastructure person, and this gave really, I worked in an environment where I could say, yeah, this was like almost actually hostile work environment, because that, like, the person really could in meetings say swear like actually like 10 people, and like, team swear words, like nobody would like, because this person knew a lot of stuff, and like exactly was like 10 years in the firm and stuff, and they could like basically, if you have like personality that is like a little bit, let's say, yeah, I am in charge, ha 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 ha, it can go pretty like in a problematic direction. Whereas if you're like just an engineer among 10 people, if you're like a bit, let's say, I mean, just have a big ego, yeah, and then it's like you are kind of contained. You have like 10 people, and it's like, the person who like behaves a little bit different, yeah, then it is like contained. But if you have the like infrastructure person, there's like no content. Like the CEO is like a business person. They don't know like, oh, but we need that person, I guess. I don't know. And then the team lead is really like, yeah, but like who else? Like if this person leaves, we don't know what we're gonna do. It was exactly like that, and in one of the firms, it was like that. So basically, it's amplified, right? So if the person is like that, you will have big problems. And I had the other situation too, like where it's like the nicest person ever, and you could really like work with them, and then it's basically like an like. So if you don't check for the like, okay, is this person actually fitting in working with humans, then you will either have huge problems or, I mean, a big benefit, right? So it's definitely, I think, a position where you need to check even more for that. Everybody says, yeah, we check for the, like, the really, like, is the person actually good to work with? But here you have to extra look for that, I guess. And it's harder because like people usually like, but we need like Kubernetes to stay with the example. And this person clearly is a Kubernetes expert, so just hire the person, I guess. And then it should be actually more balanced.
Let's talk about this a little bit more, because it'd be interesting to figure out like what would be the thing that recruiters get wrong most when they're trying to recruit a DevOps engineer. So some of these things already kind of seem to be surfacing. So firstly, because it's not, there's no bright red lines to distinguish between sort of function, etc. Is still in contention. So maybe that sense of ignorance may be one of the factors. Maybe some presumptions also. Like Ivan, you're talking about, hey, actually a good DevOps engineer needs to have really good social skills to be able to interact with other human beings in order to effectively do the job. I would say a presumption a recruiter might have would be, say, actually DevOps engineer, kind of very similar in the background kind of guy, doesn't actually need any of that. So a couple of those things. So let's explore that. What are the things that recruiters get wrong most often on DevOps engineering hiring? Ishel, what do you say?
Well, with Ivan, I totally agree with this. It depends on the company and how they are actually behaving. I went from different customers where you only needed or only were allowed to interact with your DevOps team by a ticketed system. So they actually create this firewall not to allow developers to interact with DevOps, because it was such a volatile situation that was their way to protecting both things. And let me tell you that from the conceptual point of view, I said this is wrong, because we should, like, we're trying to achieve one goal. We should move as a team, and we have to, if there conflict arises, we have to be professional enough to solve it. And as you can imagine, in that company, there were some drawbacks about this way of working. I have participated in other companies where there is less structure, the hierarchy was more flat, and people had more loosely defined roles. So you had a lot of engineers also were DevOps, and they only have like the head or somebody with a lot of experience that oversee more projects, that he was, or that person was in charge of organizing how, what, when, and why. So on my perspective is, you do need somebody that can, first of all, I'm sorry to say, but in my whole experience, they do have to de-escalate a lot of conflict, because as I said, most of the requirements of the service is down, there is no scaling so fast, etc., etc. Usually the interaction is going to be with them. And when you are in those kinds of interaction, they are not the most happy interactions ever. Because of the nature of their work, where they have different customers, they cannot have a personalized solution for every single one. So the fact that they are able to say no a lot of the time is really important. Mm. But again, we're humans. Even if you try to put up a firewall between the different teams, or you have a more open environment, it's still going to be, in my experience, and I hope this is not the entire experience of the industry, it is highly on conflict, highly on pressure. But I have interacted with purely DevOps engineers that excel at that. Their personalities particularly match with this kind, and they're happy. Mm-hmm. At least they have told me that.
We got a question from David. What's the best way to stand out as a junior DevOps engineer after boot camp without experience? Because recruiters are mostly looking for mid-level and senior DevOps engineers. Ishel and Ivan, do you have any tips for David?
I mean, in this market, it's really hard. It's really like that. So the requests from junior people who did boot camps are really the most tough, because like then it's like, okay, the CV is not good, right? It's like, okay, I did this boot camp for 4 months. So what do you do, right? So what we are building right now, for example, is a thing. It scans the CV and then asks you questions about the CV, and then you can reply on audio, and then it generates like a text with like ChatGPT and judges it. So we're actually building a thing right now. So like just shoot me an email, whoever asked this question, please. And we beta test this with you. So what it does is basically, so it outputs a ChatGPT like assessment of the CV and the project mentioned. Oh, like, well, it's not, it's like, okay, please reply more about the stuff you did. And then the person does it. And then ChatGPT says, okay, this is a good answer to this 10 questions. So this we're building right now. And then it attaches to the CV. Mm-hmm. So as a junior, you need more info, right? Your CV sucks. There's nothing. It doesn't say, okay, 5 years in Kubernetes, blah, blah. So what are you going to do? So you need to convey within like 10 seconds what you actually did that somehow is like a nugget where the recruiter doesn't close the CV within 5 seconds, because this is what's the reality. Because you have 400 emails a day, you wake up, you have like, you know, so much stuff. So you basically in 5 seconds have to make the decision, do I close the resume and email from this person or ATS entry or whatever, or do I continue? So how do you make it 35 seconds? I'm actually not kidding. This is what happens. Yeah. So how do I make it 35 seconds instead of 5? And make this recruiter, internal recruiter, agency recruiter, whoever, or founder, like CEO, spend like time. So you can, like the typical, oh, I have side projects, I have GitHub. This all takes like time, right? So you need to somehow like really in the CV or actually in the PDF. That's why we're doing it. You have the CV and you have the text below because people scroll. Because it takes too much time to, in the PDF, click a GitHub and then it loads on a new thing and then you have to search the repositories. This is too long. This will not work. This is the world we live in. So you have to somehow so much convince in the actual PDF, in my opinion, to then the person really looks more. So you junior, hello, please find something which is that. It can be something else, right? It can be really that the thing you built in the bootcamp was actually used by users. Yeah. So you could put something like, if like a company used that, if there were like really actual users, this would like stick with me. Or if you use some very special technologies that we as a hiring company we use and it's like a bit rare, this would be also a reason. What else? Yes, basically stuff like that, right? It must somehow stand out. It can't be like I did bootcamp 3 months and there's like no content whatsoever. This will be like immediately rejected. And you will not hear even back, right?
Yeah, on this, I wonder whether, so obviously people who are very young into the tech career, I think we can agree that last 12 months, 18 months or so has been very tough, particularly for that segment, because in recruiting side, it's always, we kind of looking only for experience. And that's driven not only for recruiter position, that's usually from the employer themselves that are saying, we want this. So there's been kind of a pullback really from hiring less experienced people into the industry, which is, I think, a macroeconomic scenario. Would it be fair to say that DevOps is particularly difficult to get in at a junior level because of the nature of the job? And does the DevOps community have that opinion itself? Is it more a case where, we need someone who's previously done this, and that's more the case for DevOps than it is, let's say, for a front-end engineer or for someone who's doing, a design or doing some back-end. What are your thoughts, Michelle?
Okay. The challenges, as we have said, between companies that are implementing and they have different levels of maturity in DevOps practices, like the ones that have automated whatever is good to automate, and they have, like, for example, medium time to recovery, low, etc., where you know that the organizations are really mature and they are really adopting this. We're talking about probably an incredible amount of services. We're talking about a huge infrastructure made from different cloud providers if they are in the cloud, they are cloud native. And then there is the companies, as Ivan was saying at the beginning, like in the whole spectrum. So DevOps for me, it is not so difficult to enter because the range is so wide. I mean, if you as a junior want to start being an SRI for Google, maybe that's not reachable in any time soon. You will require some years in between. But my position here, and this is the advice that I give a lot of junior developers or of DevOps engineers. The solution for me, and I have seen it work a lot, is, for example, open source or a standard, using standards. For example, when I introduce myself, I'm part of the CDF, and I also part of the CNCF. I'm part of different foundations or organizations that we're trying to create the standards over the different tools are built on. So sometimes you don't have to have a license of a very, very, very expensive tool to learn about this particular tool. Sometimes you can address the other versions of the same standard, implementing it, and you learn the concepts. You acquire that experience, even if it's not under a specific organization, but at least you know the tools, or you know the concepts that you at least know that are going to be mirrored by the different tools, even if it's a very expensive tool that you don't have access right now. So my suggestion is usually go with the foundations and standards, learn them, learn the concepts. If you can do open source, there's, for example, a very nice talk that is coming in one conference, And it's the story of a software developer that went from starting contributions at the beginning, start contribution to the Angular project, to end being a core contributor of the project in 1 year.
Mm.
So this person went from being a junior developer, first contributions into this particular project, to being part of the core team. And as you can imagine, his perspectives on his job opportunities when he was at the beginning of this journey to when it ended, or where he is at this moment, are completely different.
Mm.
And if he approached any organization in his area of expertise, the conversation is going to be totally different. So again, time is not going to be linear. That's my suggestion to you. It's more about the concepts and how well acquainted you are with the tools. Even if you don't have access to the very expensive tools, experience can be gained not only inside the organization. Obviously, the use case there will be more interesting because are going to be more of a life and death matter, but there are several opportunities there.
I mean, for me, if I look on what we discussed so far, for me, DevOps really means being a kind of an open, flexible, curiosity-driven person, because I mean, there's a lot of things going on there, and there's a lot of, you need to have security awareness, you need to have operational experience, you need to understand team dynamics. I think you need to have a high level of cultural fit. So wouldn't it make sense for HR departments not just look on the basic skill sets of guys? I mean, they're still doing it. I mean, if you look in the CV, you normally don't see anything about kind of social skills, curiosity. I mean, the only thing what you normally see is the education and what I have learned so far. And wouldn't that make sense? And I mean, Ivan, you mentioned there's still just 5 seconds to go through a CV probably. I mean, if I talk to customers, they normally tell me, okay, we are looking for these guys for 6 months now and we got no applications. So I think we have plenty of time to deal with the people that are appearing on our screens. And then we still use kind of filters that we already used 10 years ago when we had this stack of applications. But normally I think we are in the opposite situation. We don't have the stack of applications. I mean, we're really looking heavily for the guys to join our team. So wouldn't it make sense if it comes to even to talk to DevOps juniors and to really ask them about their emotional kind of motivation and what's going on behind the CV? Because I mean, for me, it really sounds you need kind of generalists. You need really curious people willing to learn on a daily or probably on an hourly basis. So it should be easy. It should be easy for junior DevOps to also join the labor market, because if they have all these skill sets on a soft skill basis, I think the rest, of course, needs training and it needs experience, and it needs probably years to gather this experience. But if the personality is not there, I think it goes totally into the other direction. It never will. It never. How experienced the guy would be if he's not a team player, I think he will fail. Definitely will fail.
That's a wider problem in the industry, I would say, though, because leaving aside DevOps per se, the identification of someone's behavior is very difficult to find on written documentation. A CV doesn't. The reason why the CV is kind of focused on hard skills, quote unquote, is because that's, it's more evidential than someone saying they're a team player. How many times have we read a CV? Everyone says they're a team player. That cannot be true. I've worked with a lot of people that literally you would not want to be in the same room. They need to be completely autonomous, ideally separated by several meters of proximity to another human being. They're better completely by themselves, and yet they'll have team player on their CV. So, our problem is, how do we surface this up? And ultimately, surfacing it up requires interaction in person. That cannot scale. And this is one of the problems we have in recruiting, because we're trying to do something that's fundamentally not scalable. Unless you do stuff like getting together in events or collaboration exercises or things of this type that isn't kind of constrained into this weird recruitment funnel, which when you think about it is a really strange way to get to know someone. You pipe them through some sort of narrow process where you might interact with them 2, 3, 4 times, total time maybe 1 hour, and then you have to figure out, oh, this is a person that's going to be a great teammate for me forever. There's no way you'll be able to do that due diligence, which is totally different from if you're like working in collaborative environment, open source stuff like you mentioned, Ivan, and also yourself, Michelle, where you may be working long-term years on a particular project. And from that time, that interaction, that's when you can start understanding, okay, we understand what the operating model this person has. And those soft skills kind of become more evident. Go ahead, Michelle.
No, you touched so many points there because, again, for example, there are companies that encourage their employees to write a little bit about them. And they're saying exactly that. Like, you are a morning person. For example, when I joined any team, I said, in part joke, part very serious, like, if you want to have with Shell meetings, please schedule after 11, because after 11, her brain is to start working. If you schedule a meeting before 11, she's going to be nuts and probably asking what language you are actually speaking at that moment. And so, and I actually know how I interact best with my teams. And that's one of the things that I sit down with my teams and ask, like, what do you prefer? Emails? Do you prefer Slack? Should I call you by phone, or that's a no-no? So for me, it's like the rules of engagement. And that is really interesting when you understand what are your better rules of engagement. You can create this conversation with your teammates, and you can actually find the middle ground. And this actually surprised a lot of people at the beginning, because they were like, oh, I didn't know that you prefer like a single email with the why, how, when, and deadlines, like everything in a single place, because I hate going back and forth different menus of communication and trying to piece out the information. It took a lot of time for me, and I feel it like it's a waste of time. So when people now know how they are going to interact best with me is by sending a single email. So now, after trial and error and several other teams where this difference in working, it was contrasted. Now I know, for example, my teammates prefer Slack instead of an email. Other teammates that prefer calls, which is weird for me, but it's totally fine for them. And it's fine for me. I mean, I'm going to do that for whoever requires it, because I also have my list of rules of engagement. So how do we do it in my one of my previous companies that I still interact a lot with them is we have kind of a meetup. It's called the Hacker Garden, where people during 3 hours in the evenings will sit down and drink beer and pizza, for the stereotypes, and work in open source projects. So because as a developers, we're always trying to make better our skills. So that's why you have katas, hackathons, but it's throwaway code. So what we do here is for open source software. So at the end of the day, there's something tangible. So I said that this is a very lazy back way of recruitment, because most of the people that have come to these events have become colleagues in the future, because there's people that are passionate, they want to do this, they go in an evening without any expectations. They only know that they're going to work on open source. So for us in that company, it was the best way to recruit our future colleagues. And we had so many good stories about that. Because it shows everything: teamwork, intention, ability to learn, social skills, etc., etc. So in a way, this is exactly what you were saying. How do we make the opportunities, and how do you go and share the situations where you yourself are presenting you as more your CV?
We got another question from Kelly. What is the few thoughts on hiring offshoring DevOps versus keeping them in the country? And that's an interesting question for me, because we were discussing about it has to do with collaboration, with communication, with being open, with probably being present in a physical way. What's your opinion on that? Because that's really interesting for me. Does it work for DevOps as well?
I don't want to have my opinion is not important, but I want to just interject because I think this is quite an amusing question because, of course, DevOps emerged from this movement onto off-premise, right? It merged into cloud. So theoretically, even philosophically, there's no reason why not. But immediately I can feel, maybe I don't like this. So yeah, what is the verdict on this? Moving a DevOps offshore, good or bad? Let's see it. Let's hear it. Ivan, your thoughts?
I mean, there are companies, friends of mine, several of them, they have just focused on that. They're just like, 5 people DevOps consultancy. And it's not, I mean, in this case, like inside the country, but this doesn't matter. In this case, actually, they have like also like international clients. So they are specialized on one thing and it's a certain DevOps activity, let's say. And they do a fantastic job. They have, as a Switzerland-based company, they have international clients, which is very unusual because, they're quite expensive, right? So that is actually something. Yeah. So basically, the way you can reply to this is like, okay, how's your company set up? If the company is like this, okay, we just use this tools and we can actually outsource it, then you can just give it to one person in somewhere or to a like super professionalized agency. And that works, I guess. But if you have set it up in the way that, sysadmin type of thing, where there's like really like, I don't know, passwords in some plain text file somewhere and total access to everything, like, then it's probably really hard. Then you probably are better off having somebody like in the office, and it's like like, I mean, it depends on the company setup. So it's very basically impossible to answer it generally, but I understand the question because the question is about like, okay, it's like this almost supporting function, right? It's like so that everything runs kind of thing. So like, that's why we outsource it. Like that's the background probably behind the question, which a little bit I can like, or for example, if you have like you build like an app, right? Then you want, okay, then how's the UX? And we want the UX to be like in our region of the world. It should be culturally similar, right? You can't just, this is very hard. And if you have like one culture, you build a SaaS tool for that. And then you need like actually probably UX, UI design people who know how this consumer base works. And so really focus. But here it's like, oh, it's a support function, like almost like a, I don't know, cleaning personnel or something, like taking care that like, it's like, if it's bad, then you notice, but if it's good, you don't notice. Like, oh yeah, it's clean, sure. It's like, oh, this is great cleaning. Like, with DevOps is the same, or IT security, it's like, oh, we have such good security. It's like, it feels so good to have the security or DevOps. It's like stuff like that, right? It's like, okay, if it works, it's like a good stomach almost. Yeah. So my stomach, like if I don't feel it, it's good. If I feel it, it's like probably ate something wrong. So it's like same here. So that's why they asked this question, right? So depending on the company setup.
No. Yeah, the most interesting thing you said there, Ivan, was the idea that good DevOps is invisible, right? In the sense that because it's working so well, it's like you might forget it's there. That's exactly what you want from this function. That might actually point into the direction of certain traits or personality types that when we're recruiting them, you need to get people that are appropriate for that type of work. So, some people like to have the spotlight on them, for instance, and they like to, always be in the front, if you like, or perhaps that personality fit is not there for someone who's going to have a career in DevOps, because actually DevOps is more like the conductor behind the screens, the you know what I mean, not on the front of the stage. So maybe that's a question maybe we ask a little bit later because that's a sidetrack. But interesting to know, how do you find a good DevOps person, and do we start diving into personality traits like this? Ishel, go ahead.
Well, on that, I will tell you the best answer that I got from somebody in the area. It says that my work is not to have work. So everything he did so he could have as many free hours or less issues, he will tune down the system so nobody had an issue. He didn't have anything on his inbox. So his work was not having work. So but he had a very preventive kind of mindset. Instead of putting out fires, he was like, let's prevent the next big firestorm here. So yes, it is interesting.
I love that.
The question, what? Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, well, on the question of remote work and the nature of the work, I don't see any problem why it shouldn't be remote distributed, unless you're in an airtight environment where, of course, like, you even need something physical to go in to do something. So, but those, I will say, that are the least of the cases in this particular industry, in this particular job role, but they exist and they are important. The other thing is I have seen a backslash. A lot of jobs in the tech community that started and were born as remote only, and they were successful remote only for years before COVID. Then there was a problem and they tried to return back to the office. So suddenly some of my friends that were working for decades remotely received an email saying like, now we expect you back at the office. And they were like, this job was born offline, so what's happening? So I see also that trend. A lot of companies pushing back to in person. But in the nature of the job, I don't see why it should be only on premises. And I would think we lost our host, so. But we can continue talking about the different questions that you had.
Has Rudy gone?
Oh.
Okay, no, that's fine. Let's roll on because we've only got 10 minutes left on this. Folks, if you've got any more questions, please pop them into the comment thread, into LinkedIn. We'll get our guests to answer them. Let's look at behaviors that from again, we're going to take a risk, sweeping generalization time. So a spoiler alert, okay, trigger warning applied. But let's have a bit of fun with this. Okay, from a recruiter side, what is particularly about DevOps engineer community that you find annoying, Ivan? So is there a trend of behavior that you think, you know what, why is this happening? Do they not understand? I'm trying to help them. Can you explain some of that? Maybe if there's not, don't invent anything, but does anything cross your mind when I ask that question?
I would say definitely it's more extreme personalities. If I think of all the DevOps people I know, and I know quite so many, it's really like there's extreme cases in the both sides from just from the personality. From the skill set, it's like hard skills, as you said, it's like separate topic, right? But from the soft skill, you can just tell, right? I mean, some people are really like this, really, as you would say the stereotype is, really the person who are left alone, they're very hard to deal with, and all the extreme, like if I think about all the people I met in the last 10 years, then all of them they're really like super difficult people. They're all like this actually, have some DevOps system in their job title, right? Some backend heavy, but all the nicest people also, they are also from that. The ones that are really sociable, they're really like, I think of them and I want to spend time with them. It's interesting, right? But if I think all the, for example, front-end people I know, they are more or less kind of like all, like, they're all more similar, kind of like, they're like, almost like how to say, like, how you would say, oh, this is like an average person, right? So it's more like, also if you go to a front-end conference, it's like everybody's like maybe better dressed and stuff than like a DevOps conference. This is how it is. So it's more extreme, So it's more extreme, and you have to be prepared to deal with that. I mean,
yes. So as a recruiter, this is why we love Ivan, the man who's prepared to just say what needs to be said. But the what you're saying there is that there's a wide spectrum of behavior, personality types in DevOps, ranging from people that, let's say, are very towards the introverted side, perhaps don't enjoy interacting, and then other people that are super extroverted or do enjoy interacting. And I wonder whether that might apply maybe to, I think I'm a little bit like this, not to say I'd ever be decent DevOps, because I don't have the organizational skills or the level of responsibility. But I do not like to interact with people unnecessarily. So I don't like to do this at all. And I tend to push that away. And sometimes the only times when I'm rude is when I feel that there's a lot of excess interaction, which I don't feel is necessary. So I wonder whether that may be a kind of a behavioral trait that might be particularly found in DevOps. I don't know. Michelle, go ahead.
Totally. I mean, remember that this is for people that are choosing their activities which they are systemic and systematically. They can decompose as a problem in the smaller parts, analyze what is happening, try to create a workflow that is actually resilient and well-defined. So whatever, and for me, it's like building puzzles. Whatever it is different from that. So sometimes you find yourself like, why do we have this conversation? Like the last 30 minutes, it took you 30 minutes to say, we need to find a different way to solve this problem. And in your mind, you're like, in a single phrase that could have been even a Slack message, you could have reduced that 30 minutes meeting with me. So, I mean, think what are their preferences, what are the tasks that we're going to be doing in our daily lives. Systematic, we're trying to reduce the overhead, to streamline the process, to find actually the problem. So we have very analytical minds. And if we don't understand what is the goal of a specific activity, we are always puzzled like, what do you want from me here?
Okay, so Ishel, mapping that back to what recruiters need to do, they need to understand that DevOps might be very intolerant to like ephemeral behavior or not getting to the point, for instance, not like being clear on the objective of the event. And sometimes recruiters can be guilty of that because, again, this goes to different cultural styles. I mean, some communication styles do not like to have direct commitments. You've got to kind of read between the lines, etc., and do all this type of behavior. I would imagine that probably is not suitable, let's say, for recruiting DevOps, particularly because people, A, may struggle to read those lines, but B, will be very just annoyed. Like, why don't you say what you want from me? And I'll be able to respond politely, but I don't understand what it means. So basically, shorter emails, bottom line up front style, bullet point, I need this from you, very clearly articulate this might help you engage with engineers a bit more. Okay, yes. Let's switch switching to the other side because we've got 5 minutes left. What is it about recruiters that DevOps people find mysterious? Is there anything that, from your community, Ishel, you hear a lot of? So why do recruiters do this, that, the other? Now might be a good time for us to explore some of those and then have Ivan or even us to kind of demystify some of those behaviors.
Open-ended questions. Like there is no real reason, and you are wondering like in what dimension, how do I even start answering that question, because I don't understand what you're trying to gauge here. What you are trying to measure? It is my knowledge, it is my experiences in the past, is my achievements. So as I said, as specific as you can, but telling the other person what is the aim of that. Like the aim here is this, and then you start asking questions. Honestly, I think because of the nature of the task, there is a very interesting personality traits that resonate with this particular job. So again, the communication, even though we want to have communication, doesn't mean a lot of information added to it. So for me, it's open-ended questions, situations that actually, and this is for any recruiter, not only for DevOps, it's situations that do not match your daily work. I mean, it's that they're trying to match how would you react to a very perplexing circumstance, and you're like, that never happens. Like, why are they asking this particular question? That is very perplexing, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
What else that I don't understand? Feedback. I sometimes have heard a lot of people asking for feedback because this can be mystified. So sometimes they don't even understand what has happened. So that's why I usually provide a lot of feedback, because I know that this is something that people really require, and sometimes they are not asking for it.
Very interesting. So let me make sure I hit the last point right, Ishel. Are you saying that unnecessary feedback is often provided by recruiters? Did I hear that correctly?
No, that is not provided by recruiters.
Right. So the DevOps people would like to have feedback from recruiters, but it's not provided. It's usually moving on. I think that's also very much standardized across recruitment generally, I'm afraid to say, but very good point. It may be relevant. Ivan, you want to respond to any of that? I mean, did you think some of that, is that familiar to you when you're interacting with DevOps people generally?
So basically, I think here it's even more like important to really like you have the keywords on the resume, right? And then as a DevOps person, you should be like, okay, like I should like very quickly and deeply tell, okay, what is what, right? How much percentage I do what, for example, or depth, and don't expect the recruiter to know. So basically you have to make, so you have the resume and then you have to think, okay, this person has very limited time, and really try to communicate that like this is used for this type of stuff in this like 20 people company. So try to communicate basically everything which is not in the CV, but super relevant in a most short time frame like that. So.
Okay. I think we're really close to the end. So this 1 hour passed by extremely quickly. So it was a pleasure, Ishel and Ivan and Hang, to have you here. I think it was, for me, it was really interesting to listen. And it, the last thing which came up in my mind is following on Ishel's message that they want to have a kind of a pragmatic, short kind of style of communication, that most of the recruiting processes that we have in place all over Europe are not fulfilling this kind of need, because you're left in the gray fog of not knowing where you are. Are you still in the top 3 or already out of the leaderboard? So I think it's a lot of intransparency, and probably that makes a big issue for DevOps, especially. It was a pleasure having you all here. I think we are having the next session is then we announce it right in time. We are talking about how to recruit Python developers, if I'm right, if I right in mind. Thank you very much, Ishel, Ivan, Hang, for being with us today, and thanks to the auditorium for listening. And as we are very close to Christmas, I think we wish all of you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year if you don't meet each other before that. So thank you very much for joining, and see you soon. Stay tuned. We are continuing with this nice kind of academy series. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Nice greetings from Vienna.